Hi, this is Steve Lacy, and tonight on Forgotten Mysteries, I have for you The Men from the Boys. And as you can see down there below, it is a Harper novel of suspense, so published by Harper and Row in 1956. The cover, I mean, not particularly memorable. Um, I've worked at publishing houses where there have been weird prohibitions on certain types of covers. I worked under one editor in chief who said black covers were strictly verboten. And then I worked with another publisher who said purple was completely off limits. And I even think I worked with an editor in chief who said no to white on a cover. So it's purely subjective, of course, but it's testament to your power or your position in the company when you can make blanket statements about what covers can and cannot be. This is just not. This just doesn't grab a lot of attention, and that's a shame because Ed Lacy is one of my favorite hard-boiled writers of his era, and I'm really glad to bring him to you tonight. He was born Leonard Zinberg, and he died fairly young, but not before having a very successful career that included winning the Edgar for Best Novel of the Year. That was in 1958 for this book, Room to Swing. And one of the reasons this book made such a mark was it has an African American or black detective is the lead character. And in fact, Lacy also wrote under pseudonyms and sometimes was presented under those pseudonyms as a black man himself. So that's interesting. It's also interesting that he was married to a black woman. So clearly, Ed Lacy had, interest in and direct relationships with the black community, which caused him to be able to write about them in ways that people admired. Excuse me. So let me tell you a little bit about The Men from the Boys, and then I'll close with some publishing lore and some other, video tidbits, that you might find interesting. So it's really quite a short book. I want under 200 pages. And the story is pretty simple. Our lead character and our narrator is Marty Bond, and takes place in New York City. And Marty's story is that he is a disgraced police officer. He's been thrown off the force for being on the take and just in general being what we would call these days a bad cop. Just not one to follow the rules, one to kind of push his weight around, one to, be willing to pick up some bucks through extortion. He gets caught and he gets thrown out of the police force, and he ends up as a hotel detective, or as they called them in those days, a hotel dick. Maybe that's not a phrase we would use nowadays. But even that position isn't strictly legit. I mean, even though he is the house detective, he's actually a pimp who serves as a middleman between the street pimps and the girls who work in this hotel that he lives in. So he takes a portion of every woman's earnings, and just in general is not a likable guy. He's a thug. There's really no other word for it. So writing about an unsympathetic hero takes a brave and very capable writer. And what I will say here is that this book's saving grace is that even though Marty Bond is not likable, somehow Lacy is able to make you feel sorry for him or understand where he's coming from. The reader's put in the position of sort of watching this kind of tragedy unfold where Marty despite numerous opportunities to improve himself or view himself through a more clear lens, does not take those opportunities. And it's rather sad to watch that happen. But his redeeming quality is that he was married for a number of years to a woman, and he had a stepson, Lawrence. And Lawrence is really, I mean, he's a grown man by the time this book takes place, but he's part of sort of a volunteer police force, civil defense force. I had never really heard of this, that they worked with the police department in urban areas, back in the 50s, 60s. We're not taken very seriously. We're considered wannabe cops or fake cops, or they called them box top cops because it was like they cut out a badge from a cereal box and pinned it on themselves. But Lawrence is an innocent and a person who very much believes in the importance of and the power of justice and doing the right thing. So almost from the very beginning of the book, there's this dichotomy set up between Lawrence and Marty. And Lawrence's goal ultimately is he's in law school. He wants to study to be a lawyer, but his ultimate goal is he wants to be a police officer because he so respected Marty, who was known back in his day as being a great cop, of course, before all the information about his nefarious deeds became known to the public. And it's interesting to see this really tough as nails guy have this soft spot for his stepson. And the way he shows it is by, on pretty much every page or doing every interaction, trying to talk the kid out of becoming a police officer. He says, I did it for 30 years. It's horrible. You see the worst of humanity. You see the dregs of society. It's depressing. You don't get paid enough money. You have no life. You might get killed in the line of duty. Like, do anything, but don't be a cop. And, I actually don't think that is that rare a piece of advice these days, because I know people across a lot of industries, friends and family members, who, when we talk about this, they say, "Oh, no, I would never want my kids to do what I do," or "No, what a horrible industry. No, I would never recommend that my kids go into doing, what I do." So maybe it's just kind of a cynical thing for the older generation. After you work in the same job for 30, 40 years, you've seen it all, and maybe you're not as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as you were when you were some, fresh-faced kid straight out of college wanting to make an impact on the world. So the story of Marty and Lawrence is sort of intertwined with a case that's currently being investigated in New York, where some mob boss guy is holed up down in Florida, and a guy he had a vendetta against in New York ends up dead. But the underworld king has a complete alibi because he is in Florida when it happened, and he shoots off his mouth. He says, he died, and it's too bad I wasn't there. I would love to have done it, But the cops are convinced that somehow he was involved, and so even though Marty doesn't want anything to do with the case, his stepson Lawrence kind of gets involved in it just from walking the streets in his capacity as a volunteer policeman. And old habits die hard, so Marty comes in and does some investigating and finds out, figures out what went on. And in the course of the whole plot coming together and the climax and the resolution and all that, Marty is very badly injured. And in the last couple pages of the book, he's told you have you have the ability to come back from this wound that you got while investigating. So really, it's up to you whether you live or die. And I won't tell you what Marty decides, but it is sort of the logical conclusion of his character arc. So while this is not a pleasant or happy story, it feels very real. Um, I like noir, but I guess I like medium dark noir. I don't usually go for that ultra dark noir, but I know there are people who do. I wouldn't say this is ultra, but it is pretty bleak. Um, our protagonist is someone who thinks nothing of slapping around women, or he likes to slap guys too. He's kind of like a power play for him. He just likes to crack people across the face. So all along as a reader, you're thinking, gee, Marty, if you could just take a right-hand turn, get yourself on the right path, you have what it takes to maybe make a difference in the world or be a positive role model to your stepson. But instead, you just keep making the same old stupid mistakes. So it is a character study. The plot is good. It's serviceable. It almost feels like it plays a little bit of second fiddle to the relationship between Marty and Lawrence. But all told, it balances things out pretty nicely. I can't say that I thought that was Ed Lacy's best book, but I don't know when I'll read another one that I haven't read yet. And so I just wanted to make sure I got Ed Lacy out there, to the YouTube verse to consider, because he wrote some really, really good books. Another great one is called, what's the title? The Best That Ever Did It. So that's a good one to start with. And so is Room to Swing, which I showed you earlier. The book is very suspenseful as described. And so I liked it. I like Lacy. I like his writing. He's not afraid to go to dark places, and was just really, I think, a good writer. But this is where I'm gonna do some speculation here. So this can kind of be the fun part of the video, whatever. So on the back cover of The Men from the Boys are blurbs about Lacy's first novel, the novel that preceded this in hardcover. And I just want to read you one of them. It comes from the New York Herald Tribune. And it says, Mr. Lacy has been in soft covers, but this stiff collar job shows him off rather better as he exhibits a suspenseful proceeding bending from a rather pretty ingenuity. So what being referred to there is that Lacy started out as a paperback writer. And this was an era when I think, paperback originals were considered to be of lower quality in terms of writing or literariness, or, that je ne sais quoi, right? That a hardcover book meant you were a really good writer, and softcover books were for, mass market people or people who just weren't considered to have the chops to put it in, to publish them in hardcover. But Joan Kahn, the famous editor of the Harper Novels of Suspense, discovered him and signed him to do his first hardcover book on her imprint, the Harper Novels of Suspense. So this is an example of Joan Kahn doing what she did best, which was seeing talent, realizing how that talent could be nurtured to bring a person from being a decent, okay writer and storyteller to being a really good novelist worthy of being published in hardback. And as we see, as I mentioned earlier, a couple years later, Lacy did win the Edgar Best Novel of the Year with Room to Swing. So clearly, Joan Kahn had her effect on Ed Lacy, and you can tell that if you read Lacy's pre-Harper and Row books. I'll show you a couple of them, which are interesting. These were published in England as hardback versions of paperback originals. So isn't that kind of flippy floppy? So here's one of them. It's called Pity the Honest, right? Published by Boardman, right, in the UK as part of their American mystery series. Here's another one, Double Trouble by Ed Lacy, also published by Boardman. And these two books, while I enjoyed them, their quality level is definitely a couple notches below his output in hardcover. So I suspect that Joan Kahn, who was known for, sitting with a red pencil and editing every line of a manuscript, I suspect that she really worked with Lacy to improve his abilities as a novelist. And it paid off because, he received Mystery's highest honor, the Edgar for Best Novel of the Year. So it just goes to show, of course, I'm biased in this regard, the effect that a really good editor can have on a book. Right? A really good editor can take a book that is good and make it very good or great. I should say the editor does that. The editor, in collaboration with the author, work together. But the best editors are really collaborators with their authors, and that was what Joan Kahn was known for. So I'm pleased to have brought you today The Men from the Boys by Ed Lacy. Definitely check him out. Try to get one of the Harper books rather than one of the paperback originals, just because the Harper books are going to be better. Don't start with The Hotel Dwellers, which is really kind of an attempt at a straight novel, which wasn't Lacy's strong suit. His strong suit was, mystery and suspense. And like I said, practically any of the Harper books, I think you will like, if this is the kind of book that you like. When I turned the page, the final page, I had this feeling of my heart was kind of hurting a little bit because the story was so sad. Watching somebody go so wrong when they have the potential to go to be so much more than they are. It's tragic, but there is a lesson in it. And so if this appeals to you, give Ed Lacy a try. Okay, that's what I have for you tonight. Thank you for watching, and I will be back next time. Bye now.